The shopping bags were everywhere when I walked through the front door, designer labels scattered across our living room like confetti after an expensive celebration. Nordstrom, Saks, Tiffany and COC, Louis Vuitton. My wife Jessica emerged from the kitchen, radiant with the glow of someone who had just spent what she believed was an unlimited amount of money. "Welcome home, honey," she called, gesturing grandly at her purchases. "I know you said to be careful with spending while you were in Singapore, but I found some incredible deals. And your bonus just came through, so I figured we could celebrate a little." I set my suitcase down carefully, maintaining the composed expression I'd perfected over my 3-week business trip. What Jessica didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that I had closed our joint spending account 2 days before leaving for Asia. Every purchase she'd made over the past 3 weeks had been automatically charged to her personal credit cards, the ones connected to accounts containing approximately $847.32 total. "How much celebrating are we talking about?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral as I surveyed the merchandise spread across our coffee table, sofa, and dining room chairs. "Oh, not too much," she said with a dismissive wave, that familiar gesture she used when discussing money she hadn't earned. "Maybe 12 or 15,000. It's hard to keep track when everything's so beautifully priced." She moved to embrace me, her new diamond bracelet catching the afternoon light. "I missed you so much, and I wanted everything to be perfect for when you got home." I returned her hug, feeling the stiffness of price tags still attached to her new designer dress. Behind her, I could see credit card receipts scattered on the kitchen counter, evidence of a spending spree that would have devastating consequences she was blissfully unaware of. As she pulled back to smile at me, I realized this moment represented the culmination of 18 months of careful planning and the beginning of a reckoning that would change our marriage forever. My name is David Walsh, 44 years old, Senior Vice President of Operations at Meridian International, a logistics company specializing in global supply chain management. My career requires analytical thinking, strategic planning, and the ability to anticipate problems before they materialize, skills that have served me well both professionally and, as circumstances proved, personally. I approach challenges methodically, gathering information and developing comprehensive strategies rather than reacting emotionally to immediate provocations. I met Jessica Crawford 5 years ago at a charity fundraiser in downtown Chicago. She was stunning, charming, and working as a marketing coordinator for a boutique public relations firm. Our connection was immediate. She was vivacious and socially adept in ways that balanced my more reserved, analytical nature. We married after an 18-month courtship, combining my established financial stability with her social connections and apparent career ambitions. The early years of our marriage seemed ideal. We purchased a beautiful home in Winnetka, traveled frequently, and maintained an active social calendar befitting our combined professional positions. Jessica continued working at the PR firm while I advanced through Meridian's management ranks, eventually reaching senior executive level with corresponding compensation that placed us comfortably in the upper middle class. The first signs of trouble appeared subtly, approximately 2 years into our marriage. Jessica's work hours became increasingly erratic, her explanations for missed meetings or cancelled plans growing vague and inconsistent. More concerning was her relationship with money, which evolved from casual spending to increasingly expensive tastes that seemed disconnected from any sense of earning or budgeting. Initially, I attributed this to lifestyle adjustment. My salary allowed us to live comfortably without Jessica needing to worry about money in ways she had before our marriage. I wanted her to feel secure and enjoy the fruits of our combined success. When she left her job 18 months ago, citing stress and a desire to explore other opportunities, I supported the decision financially while encouraging her to pursue whatever direction genuinely interested her. What I hadn't anticipated was that Jessica's relationship with money would become increasingly problematic without the natural boundaries that employment provides. Her spending accelerated from reasonable personal purchases to extravagant shopping sprees that seemed motivated more by the act of spending than by actual need or desire for specific items. Designer handbags accumulated in our closet, many never used. Jewelry purchases became frequent, always justified by sales or special occasions that seemed to occur weekly. More troubling was Jessica's attitude toward this spending. She treated our joint accounts as unlimited resources, never inquiring about balances or budgets, never participating in financial planning discussions. When I attempted to address the issue directly, Her responses ranged from dismissive to hostile, often culminating in accusations that I was being controlling or failing to appreciate her contributions to our lifestyle and social standing. The breaking point came 6 months ago during a dinner party at our home. Jessica had spent $4,700 that afternoon on what she described as table settings and flower arrangements for the event. When our guest, my colleague Michael, complimented the elegant presentation, Jessica launched into a detailed description of each purchase, their costs, and her sophisticated taste in selecting them. Michael's uncomfortable expression as Jessica recounted spending his monthly salary on a single dinner party crystallized my growing concern about her complete disconnect from financial reality. That night, after our guests departed, I attempted another serious conversation about our spending patterns. Jessica, we need to establish some boundaries around purchases. The dinner was lovely, but spending nearly $5,000 on one evening isn't sustainable. Her response was swift and defensive. David, you make plenty of money. What's the point of success if we can't enjoy it? Besides, appearances matter. These people are important for your career. Our guests would have been equally impressed with a meal that cost a tenth of what you spent, I replied calmly. That's so typical of you, she snapped, her voice taking on the edge to quiet whenever her choices were questioned. Everything has to be calculated and measured. You can't just trust me to handle things appropriately. This conversation, like previous ones on the topic, ended without resolution. Jessica's spending continued unabated, and I began to realize that traditional approaches to marital financial discussions were ineffective with someone who had fundamentally different relationship with money and responsibility. As a logistics professional, I am trained to solve complex problems by analyzing systems, identifying failure points, and implementing targeted interventions. I began applying this methodology to our financial situation, gathering data about Jessica's spending patterns, timing, and apparent motivations. The results were revealing and concerning. Over the 18 months since leaving her job, Jessica had spent an average of $8,300 per month beyond normal household expenses. Her purchases clustered around certain triggers: my business trips, social events, or periods when she felt what she described as stressed or unappreciated. Most significantly, her spending had accelerated dramatically in recent months, coinciding with my increased travel schedule and her growing social isolation. Further investigation revealed additional concerns. Jessica had applied for several credit cards without my knowledge, using our joint assets as security. She had made inquiries about personal loans, ostensibly for investment opportunities she couldn't clearly articulate when questioned. Most troubling, she had begun making large cash withdrawals from our accounts, claiming they were for household expenses that never materialized in actual purchases or receipts. 3 months ago, I discovered Jessica had withdrawn $12,000 in cash over a 2-week period, claiming it was for home improvement consultations and investment research. When I pressed for specifics, her answers became evasive and contradictory. A review of our actual home improvement activity revealed no corresponding work or consultations. The pattern suggested either gambling, substance abuse, or financial support for undisclosed relationships or commitments. Rather than confronting Jessica directly with these discoveries, which previous experience suggested would lead to defensiveness and deception rather than honest discussion, I developed a more strategic approach. I would create a controlled environment that would reveal the true extent of her spending behavior while protecting our core assets from further depletion. The plan was elegantly simple: remove Jessica's access to significant funds temporarily, while maintaining the appearance of normal account activity. Then observe her actual behavior when she believed she had unlimited resources. This would provide definitive evidence of whether her spending was compulsive and uncontrolled, or whether she could exercise restraint when she believed it was necessary. 2 weeks before my scheduled 3-week business trip to Singapore, I began implementing the strategy. I opened new accounts at a different bank, gradually transferring our primary assets to secure locations Jessica could access. I restructured our joint checking account to maintain minimum balances while ensuring that overdrafts would be declined, rather than covered by transfers from savings or credit lines. Most crucially, I closed our main joint account entirely, informing the bank that we were consolidating finances and no longer needed the account. This meant that Jessica's debit card, while still physically functional, would be declined for any purchases However, the automated bill pay systems and her established credit cards remained active, creating the illusion that our finances continued normally. I informed Jessica that I was leaving for an extended business trip to Singapore, as was factually true. I mentioned that a significant bonus was expected during my absence. Also true, though I didn't specify that it would be deposited into accounts she couldn't access. I encouraged her to take care of herself while I was away and not worry about expenses, knowing this permission would trigger her spending impulses while her actual access to funds was severely limited. The psychological aspects of this strategy were as important as the financial ones. Jessica's spending often appeared motivated by feelings of abandonment or neglect during my business travels. By explicitly encouraging her to spend freely, I was removing the transgressive thrill that seemed to motivate many of her purchases, while simultaneously forcing her to confront the reality of spending money she didn't actually have. As my departure date approached, I made one final preparation. I arranged with our home security system to send me real-time notifications of all entrances and exits, allowing me to track Jessica's activity patterns during my absence. This wasn't surveillance motivated by suspicion of infidelity, but rather data collection to understand the scope and timing of her shopping behaviors. The Singapore trip proceeded as planned. 3 weeks of intensive meetings, contract negotiations, and facility inspections across Southeast Asia. Throughout this period, I monitored our financial accounts remotely, watching as Jessica's attempted purchases triggered overdraft notifications and automatic declines. Simultaneously, I received credit card alerts showing rapidly accumulating balances on her personal accounts as she compensated for the inexplicable problems with our joint account. At the end of the first week, her personal credit cards were approaching their limits. By the end of the second week, she had maxed out multiple accounts and was attempting to open new credit lines using our home as collateral. The home security notifications showed daily shopping trips that became increasingly frantic as her available credit dwindled. Most revealing were her phone calls during this period. Jessica left multiple voicemails on my work line, each revealing more of her actual mindset about money and our relationship. The early messages were casual complaints about technical problems with the bank. By the second week, her tone had shifted to frustration and confusion. The final messages, left just days before my return, revealed genuine panic as she realized the scope of the financial trap she had created for herself. "David, something's wrong with all our accounts," she said in one message, her voice strained. "I can't get cash anywhere, and the credit cards are saying they're over limit, which can't be right. I need you to call the bank as soon as possible." The final message, recorded the day before my return flight, was particularly illuminating. "I don't understand what's happening. I may have spent a little more than usual, but nothing that should cause these problems. Can you transfer some money to my personal account when you get this? I have some bills that need to be paid immediately." When I walked through our front door to find Jessica surrounded by her purchases, radiating the confidence of someone who believed she had been spending our money freely, I realized my strategy had revealed exactly what I needed to know. Jessica's relationship with money was fundamentally disordered. Her spending was compulsive and uncontrolled. Most significantly, she had no internal mechanism for restraint when she believed resources were unlimited. "Tell me about the purchases," I said, settling into the chair across from her display of acquisitions. Jessica launched into an enthusiastic description of each item: the investment quality handbag that would hold its value, the jewelry that was perfect for the charity galas we'll be attending, the clothes that were essential for maintaining our image. Her justifications were elaborate and rehearsed, suggesting she had been preparing explanations for weeks. "And the financing for all this?" I asked casually. "Oh, just the usual accounts," she said with a dismissive wave. Though I did have some strange technical problems with the bank. My card kept getting declined for no reason. I had to use the credit cards more than usual, but your bonus should cover everything when it processes. I nodded thoughtfully. "Jessica, I need to show you something." I retrieved my laptop and opened our banking interface. "These are our actual account balances." As she watched, I displayed the near zero balances in our joint checking account, the closed status of our main spending account, and the maxed out balances on her credit cards totaling $23,847.32. Her expression shifted from confusion to comprehension to panic as she processed the implications. "I don't understand," she whispered. "How is this possible? It's possible because I closed our joint account before leaving for Singapore, I said calmly. Every purchase you made over the past 3 weeks was charged to your personal credit cards. The technical problems you experienced were simply the reality of trying to spend money that wasn't available. The silence that followed was profound. Jessica stared at the computer screen, then at her purchases, then back at me. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and hollow. Why would you do that? Because I needed to understand whether your spending was thoughtful and controlled or compulsive and unlimited, I replied. The evidence suggests the latter. Over the next several hours, we had the most honest conversation about money we'd ever managed. Surrounded by the tangible evidence of her uncontrolled spending, Jessica couldn't maintain her usual defensive positions. For the first time, she acknowledged that her relationship with money had become problematic and that her spending often felt driven by emotions she didn't fully understand. I felt so abandoned while you were gone, she admitted. Shopping made me feel better, like I was taking care of myself when no one else was. But you weren't taking care of yourself, I pointed out gently. You were creating a financial crisis that will take months to resolve. The conversation continued late into the evening, covering territory we had never successfully navigated before. Jessica acknowledged her spending had spiraled beyond any reasonable boundaries. She recognized that her justifications for purchases were often elaborate rationalizations rather than genuine reasoning. Most importantly, she admitted that she had been using our financial resources as an emotional regulation mechanism rather than approaching money with any sense of responsibility or planning. What happens now? She asked finally, looking at the evidence of her spending spree with new awareness of its implications. Now we develop a plan, I said. We'll consolidate the credit card debt, establish clear budgets and boundaries, and you'll get professional help understanding why spending became your primary coping mechanism. The resolution wasn't immediate or simple. We spent the following months working with a financial counselor who specialized in compulsive spending behaviors. Jessica entered individual therapy to address the underlying emotional patterns that drove her financial choices. We restructured our finances to include accountability measures and spending limits that prevented either of us from making large purchases without consultation. The process was challenging for both of us. Jessica had to confront the reality that her spending had been fundamentally selfish and unsustainable. I had to acknowledge that my strategic approach to revealing her behavior, while effective, had been somewhat manipulative and could have been handled with more direct communication if I had been willing to risk a confrontation earlier. 6 months after my return from Singapore, we had developed a much healthier relationship with money and with each other. Jessica had returned to work part-time, finding purpose and structure that reduced her emotional dependence on spending. We had paid off the credit card debt through a combination of budget discipline and temporary lifestyle adjustments. Most importantly, we had established communication patterns that allowed us to address financial decisions collaboratively rather than through conflict or deception. A year later, Jessica reflected on the experience during one of our regular financial planning sessions. I hated you for setting that trap, she said, but I understand now that it was the only way to make me see what I was really doing. I couldn't hear you when you tried to tell me directly. I should have found a more direct way to address the problem earlier, I acknowledged. Allowing the situation to escalate to the point where strategic intervention was necessary wasn't fair to either of us. The experience taught both of us valuable lessons about money, marriage, and the importance of addressing problems before they become crises. My professional approach to problem solving had provided a solution, but at the cost of temporary deception that could have been avoided with earlier, more difficult conversations. Today, our relationship with money is fundamentally different. We maintain separate discretionary spending accounts with agreed-upon limits. Major purchases require consultation regardless of who initiates them. Most importantly, we've learned to recognize and address the emotional triggers that previously led to financial conflicts before they spiral into destructive behaviors. My wife spent thousands while I was away, and I let her because she didn't know I'd closed the account. The strategy revealed the full extent of her compulsive spending while protecting our core assets from further depletion. But the real value wasn't in the tactical victory of exposing her behavior. It was in creating a crisis that forced both of us to confront problems we had been avoiding and develop healthier approaches to both money and communication. Looking back, I recognized that the controlled crisis I created was both necessary and problematic. Necessary because Jessica's spending had become unsustainable and resistant to direct discussion. Problematic because it involved deception that could have damaged trust permanently if not handled carefully afterward. The approach worked in our specific situation, but it required extensive follow-up work to rebuild genuine partnership from the foundation of revealed truth.